a bottle of Laphroaig cask strength in each hand. This is my happy place. Welcome back, whisky fans. It's kind of rude not to do this video. We've just had the batch 15 of Laphroaig 10yo Cask strength drop here in the UK. I've had it for a few days. I've been really enjoying it. I'm really pleased to say that I do think that it's better than the previous two batches, which I thought that were sweeter and just a little bit more sanitized. Not really what you expect from the powerhouse that is Laphroaig out on Islay. So I'm going to do a little head-to-head video here to compare the flavours and aromas that you can expect in each. I must say at this point that I do think that this video is a little bit on the academic, geeky side, because neither of these are bad whiskies. And I hope that no one got that interpretation from my previous review of the batch 14. There is no bad batch of Laphroaig 10 cask strength really, just some that are better than others. I think that both of these, which way round is it? The batch 14 and the batch 15, they're both great whiskies, they're both great value, but half of the fun of having batch releases year to year or every 6 months or whatever is noticing the differences and seeing the slight inconsistencies and changes between them. So before I get into it, I'm also going to say that this won't be a detailed nosing or tasting of either of these whiskies. It's going to be a differential tasting, so I'm going to have at the same time a glass of each. So I'm basically just going to be mentioning the differences that I find between them, any prominent notes that I find in one that aren't present in the other. So without much further ado, let's get some in the glass and see what those differences are. So, because I am completely incapable of keeping track of what is what otherwise, I'm going to have the batch 14 in my left hand, and I'm going to have the batch 15 in my right hand, because otherwise I'm going to get horribly confused and it's going to be an absolute disaster. So, I'm going to do a little bit of a nosing of each, so I kind of get accustomed to each before I'm going to start with the 14 and then switch over to the 15, see what differences we've got. So immediately, the first thing I'm going to say, without even tasting these, but this is backed up by the tasting as well, that the batch 14 is actually bottled at 58.6 and the newer batch 15 is bottled at 56.5. So you've got about 2% ABV difference between the two. And that 58.6 on the batch 14 from last year, a lot of people might disagree with me, but I think that 58.6, unless it's a very well-made whiskey, that's edging up into the territory where water might almost be required once you get to about 60% and above. Water almost always benefits a little bit. I'm not saying that whiskey in the 60% territory can't be enjoyable, neat, but almost always whiskies that get up to that 60 mark benefit from a little bit of water. But nosing these, I think that batch 14 at the 2% higher strength actually noses a lot weaker than what I'm getting from the batch 15 at 2% less. Considerably less. That batch 14, it just seems, you wouldn't be surprised, or I wouldn't be surprised to hear if I'd nosed this blind that this was 50 or even 46%. And obviously there's quite a lot of oxidation gone on there, but I did take a little sample of this stuff when I first opened the bottle, so I had a sample that hadn't oxidized. And I think that the 14 on the nose is just so much lighter, so much less aggressive, that you've got a little prickle on the nose of the batch 15 at 56.5, as you probably should. But the batch 14 is nowhere near as punchy. The batch 14, compared to the 15, I'm getting lots of floral notes. Very floral for a 10 cask strength Laphroaig. Very sweet, caramel. Very subdued, rounded, sweet, light. Much more accessible than the batch 15. Whereas when you're looking at the 15 in comparison, much more bold, much more punchy, more dry, a little bit saltier than what you're getting on the batch 14, a little bit more farmy, and more oak spice as well. And just nosing these now, I've realised that I've described probably 2/3 of the tasting of the nosing notes that you get between these two. So I think really it's just a case of the 15 just has more aroma on the nose. There's just more of it. So let's see what the difference is on the palate. So I'm going to start with a sip of the 15 on this one, so I can then have a sip of the 14 and compare it. Fantastic whiskey. So this is the 14. So on the palate, same thing really. You're just getting more flavour from the 15 than the 14. The 14 is very, very sweet. It's almost like peated syrup on the palate on the batch 14. Caramel, toasted oak, sweet smokiness. It's a fantastic whiskey, to be fair to it. It's really good stuff. It's better than the majority of peated whiskey out there that you can get. But the 15 is just the same thing turned up to 11. So I'm going to have another sip of the 15 and see, just look at the notes that spring out to me, because I've still got obviously the notes and the flavours on my tongue from the 15. So it's a really useful technique, actually, differential tasting, to have a sip of one thing and see which flavours jump out at you from the other one, because those flavours that jump out are going to be the things that are more prominent, that aren't necessarily as present in the other whiskey. So this is 15. Yeah, batch 15, more bold. There's definitely a greater salinity to the palate of the batch 15, more maritime. It's also more oaky, but it's more of an oak spice, a very balanced, controlled oak spice, rather than that sweet caramel oak that you get on the 14. Also, more notes of salty peat and those farmy cowshed notes that you get on a lot of Laphroaigs. There's more of that farmy quality to the peat in the batch 15 than there is on the 14. Just going to have another sip of the 14, look at the finish. To be fair to the 14, compared to the 15, it is remarkably easy drinking, and considering that ABV of nearly 59%, it's really strong stuff. It's very, very easy drinking. It's very smooth, very rounded, very enjoyable. It's very disarming and non-challenging. And those notes that I'm getting through, those subtle, friendly, gentle notes on the batch 14, I can see a lot of people being swayed by this. I think that the batch 14 probably converted a lot of people to be Laphroaig fans. On the finish of that Laphroaig 10 cask strength 14, it's really all about the sweet oak and sweet smokiness, all sweet, 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 very non-challenging, inoffensive, with a little bit of that medicinal iodine quality. Just going to have a little sip of the 15. 15, that is what I think of when I think of Laphroaig 10 cask strength. It's smokier than the 14, batch 14, saltier. You've got more of that peated oak spice and a greater dry, saline, maritime edge. I think that between these two, the 15 is clearly the edgier and more interesting dram. I think that the 14 is so much smoother and sweeter that it's shocking that it's actually, the 14 is more drinkable and more accessible, even at full strength, despite that slightly higher ABV. And I think that's something that's backed up by Jeff's review at Whisky. Jeff is a fantastic channel. It's great content. If you haven't subscribed to him already, you really should do. But the batch 14, which is this one, batch 14, he's reviewed that recently because he's just got hold of a bottle over in Taiwan where he's based, and he's done a great review of that, so you should really check that out. But in his review he says how sweet and accessible a whiskey it is, and he really liked the stuff. It's a great review of a whiskey that he really enjoyed. But I do think that this batch 15 is more of a return to form for the Laphroaig 10 cask strength. I think this is a really great batch, and although it's possibly not the best batch of 10 cask strength that I've had, I'm probably going to get a second bottle of this. In particular, I think that it's really good that it takes water so well. It's great that it opens up and gives you that little bit more complexity when you do knock down the ABV that little bit. So it's really good that you've kind of got that choice between having it at the full, unrestrained ABV and getting all of that power, or you can add a tiny bit of water to it and it swims really well, opens up and gives you that bit of extra complexity, so you've got that choice. Personally, I think that Laphroaig 10 cask strength batch 15 is just about Laphroaig at its finest. I think that when you look at the older expressions of Laphroaig, like even the 15 and 16, but especially like the 25-year-old and all of those super expensive ones, because you do lose that much peat each year the longer the whiskey stays in the cask, I think you're really doing yourself and your wallet a disservice. If you want to see what Laphroaig can achieve, it's all about the 10 cask strength, and I think that the 15 is a fantastic example. So I hope this little comparison's been useful to you, and if you have had this one yet, then let me know what you think, and what do you think the best batch of Laphroaig 10 cask strength has been. Thanks for watching, and cheers.